G'day folks, and welcome to this session report of Scenario 1 Jig Day from Tinian, the Forgotten Battle. This is part of the company scale system. The series designed by Adam Starkweather, with this title designed by Mortell, art by Antonio Pinar, and published by Compass Games. Now, this scenario covers the first day of the invasion of Tinian on the 24th of July 1944, and I have to preface this report by saying that this was my first scenario. It was, well, treat this as a learning scenario. I made many rules mistakes and tactical errors, and I was almost tempted not to put this report up, but I thought, well, this can serve as sort of a learning exercise and a lesson really in what not to do. So I'm going to run through how the battle played out and highlight some of the critical mistakes that I made, in the hope that anyone else coming along to this scenario or this battle or company scale system can learn from that and avoid the same mistakes that I made. The scenario starts off with the Japanese in some pretty good defensive positions, but largely away from the landing beaches. So this gives the Americans an opportunity to land, get the element of surprise. There was, of course, this historically this feint down south, which was successful. It distracted the Japanese, delayed their movement to the north, gave the American Marines, the 4th Marine Division, time to land. Now, in this scenario, the Americans need to basically secure that historic beachhead that was secured by the end of the first day, and prepare for the Japanese counterattack, which took place in the evening of the 24th of July. Thus, these Marines land and they need to rush out. They need to get out to the front line of that beachhead and establish defensive positions. I didn't do that. I'm learning the game. I was pretty slow getting off the beaches. I thought I'd launch an assault on this Japanese indirect fire artillery position close to the beaches. All of that slowed me down. I didn't realise how much of a rush I should have been, and so the Marines slowly plod along, make their way through the sugarcane. Out to the north, they reach this beachhead perimeter pretty quickly and set up a good defensive position, but down in the south, southeast, even along the eastern edge, they just dawdle a bit too much, and they're actually too slow moving their units to that area. By midday, it's pretty clear that this is becoming a problem. Japanese reinforcements have arrived from the southeast. They rapidly move pretty much straight into that gap that the Marines haven't moved up into. This could all very easily be avoided if the Marines would have moved southeast more rapidly. There are also problems with these Marines being caught out in the open, and the Marines need to be careful of Japanese spotters and pretty much blind them as soon as possible. The Japanese defensive positions include a lot of artillery pieces, and this was critical throughout the day, as many of the combat effects from indirect fire cause a route check on these Marines. When the Marines make a route check, they've got pretty good troop quality, they add their defensive terrain and so forth. They pretty much need a 7 or an 8 or less to succeed. In most cases, only a 9 will see them failing, but this inevitably happened when these Marines were caught out in column, moving to the front of their beachhead. When they failed their route check, typically a unit will, when it's in column, retreat to the routed units box on their divisional display if their headquarters are on the board. If not, this unit is eliminated. And because the Marine headquarters don't arrive until later in the day, of course, many of those Marine companies were eliminated. So in playing through this scenario, I should have been more mindful of that. I should have been sort of avoiding perhaps the line of sight of many of these potential Japanese spotters, blinding them wherever possible with cannon, battery, and so forth. I didn't do it, so I certainly played that wrong. I also underestimated the power of support weapons. Throughout the day, I was very slow to get... Well, these support weapons sort of come on around midday or so, and I was very slow getting them to the units that needed them. And certainly the Americans need their superiority of support weapons to overwhelm many of these Japanese positions. This includes, of course, their flamethrowers, their heavy machine guns, which are good for sort of a defensive position. It enables the Americans to fire multiple times, opportunity fire on the approaching Japanese. I mean, that was certainly a problem. It wasn't as bad as the the slow movement of the Marines off the beaches. Thus, by sort of early to mid-afternoon, the Japanese had already sort of infiltrated into that beachhead historical Jig Day area, and had already eliminated quite a number of American marine companies. As I said, in this scenario, the Japanese need to move into that beachhead, and they also score victory points by eliminating American infantry companies, including engineers. And they were racking up these points very quickly. They very quickly, by sort of, I think it was maybe 3 to 5 p.m., had secured a major Japanese victory. Nonetheless, I played out the rest of the scenario. By this stage, I'm kind of learning my lessons, and you can see some of these support weapons were appearing with American infantry. They were trying to launch some decent assaults and failing along the way. Some airstrikes throughout the day were pretty critical. One of these airstrikes eliminated a small Japanese tank unit that appeared in the southeast. It was a perfect strike, pretty much. Caused an E elimination result on that target. What else? Yeah, there were a few kind of moments there where the Americans eliminated a couple of Japanese companies, but again, by the night turn, the Japanese had established defensive positions. They'd not only moved into that historical Jig Day area, but they'd started to build their little foxholes, some trenches in the southeast with their Japanese engineers, and had very safely secured a major Japanese victory. So, the Americans lost this scenario, but again, I put this down to these tactical errors and a number of rules goofs as well. Because I've come from the GTS system, I kept playing the dispatch point gain incorrectly. By the rules, during the preparation phase, you roll a die, and if you roll less than your dispatch rating, you gain 3 dispatch points. If you roll higher than your dispatch rating, you gain 1 dispatch point. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of applying the old GTS system of rules, which gave both sides far too many dispatch points, and in particular gave the Japanese quite a lot of dispatch points that they otherwise wouldn't have. I also kept forgetting about the American off-map artillery. This is 3 artillery groupments based on Saipan that can fire onto Tinian, and they're pretty important. There's some pretty got some pretty heavy firepower there, and I just kept forgetting about them. So they could have been a lot more effective in, again, placing barrage markers on a lot of those Japanese units. Now, I did launch several assaults throughout the day, but these were pretty unsuccessful by the Americans. So I certainly need to revisit those assault rules and think about ways to bring more support to my assaults, my prepared assaults, bringing more units, bringing more support weapons, bringing more indirect fire to increase those attacker, primarily American assault modifiers. That would certainly help in a few situations. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the Japanese have just eliminated far too many marine companies, almost entirely due to their route results on those fire checks. Plus, there are 7 Japanese companies inside that historical Jig Day area for another 7 victory points. So, far exceeding the Japanese major victory requirements.